Good afternoon, Prynhawn Da. I'm Liz Miles. I'm an Assistant Director at Estyn, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us here this afternoon. I'm going to start with some housekeeping. So if you'd like to listen to this webinar in Welsh, please go to the top of your screen. You'll see 3 dots for more action, then select language and speech, language interpretation, and the last step is click on Welsh. Today, we're going to hear from Carl Sherlock, HMI, who's the author of our recent report on teaching the curriculum for Wales. The report looked at how effectively schools are developing and embedding approaches to teaching the curriculum for Wales. And you'll hear a short summary from Carl of the findings from his report. But if you go into the Q&A section on the top of your screen, there's also a link to the full report, so you can have the greater detail should you want it. We're really pleased to welcome Julia Adams, the head teacher of Abontvain Primary, and Rhys Hopkins, deputy head from Fitzhallen High School. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Rhys, for joining us today. And we're really looking forward to hearing about your work. If anyone's got any questions, please submit them to the Q&A box, and we'll try our very best to answer as many as possible. I'm now going to hand you over to Carl, who will share the summary of the main messages from his report on teaching the curriculum for Wales. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, all. It's pretty blustery outside of my window here, so hopefully you can all hear me okay and my internet stays connected. But thank you for your time and for joining us this afternoon. So as Liz has mentioned, this report focuses on how schools are shaping pedagogy, designing learning and supporting teachers to grow professionally. Brief bit of background before we start. For this report, we looked at educational research, we looked at evidence from our inspections, meetings with a range of stakeholders, and of course we visited 25 schools across Wales to talk to them and to see them in action. And what we found paints a nuanced picture, strengths to celebrate, but also areas that need some deeper, more consistent development. In many schools we visited, we saw a clear, whole school approach to teaching, an aspirational vision for teaching, but also one that moved a bit beyond that and was genuinely shaping classroom practice. In these schools, teachers are developing effective pedagogical approaches that draw both on research evidence or the science of teaching and on practical classroom experience. And I think what's been really great to see is when schools recognise that teaching is a science grounded in how pupils learn, but it's also an art requiring creativity, curiosity and responsiveness to the pupils in front of you, and also a craft that is refined over time through reflection, feedback and professional dialogue. And where this shared vision exists, staff talk about teaching using a common professional language, supported by frameworks that make expectations clear and coherent. However, in a minority of schools, that vision isn't as well articulated, and without that shared clarity, approaches vary across the school, and sometimes pupils' experiences become inconsistent. In the strongest schools, staff are planning with a real focus on progression in depth, not just breadth. They think carefully about how knowledge, skills and understanding evolve over time, and just as importantly, how learning deepens as pupils revisit and apply concepts in new contexts. This deliberate sequencing enables pupils to gain mastery, connect ideas, refine skills, and gain a more sophisticated grasp of what they are learning. Where planning is weaker, learning can sometimes be disjointed or less cumulative, which slows pupils' deeper understanding and progress. And of course, this clear planning for knowledge and skills has an impact on classroom practice. In classrooms where teaching was most effective, we observed several common characteristics: clear learning intentions and success criteria, particularly for the teacher, but also for the pupil, purposeful questions that probe and extend thinking, and feedback that guides improvement. and classroom routines that promote independence and reflection by pupils with their peers and their teachers. Teachers in these schools use assessment for learning skillfully to adapt in real time to pupils' needs, to address misconceptions, push learning forwards, and to reflect over time on the impact their teaching approaches are having on pupils' learning. And what has been pleasing to see is, while a few misconceptions still remain, such as treating the four purposes as lesson objectives or feedback and assessment criteria, these are becoming less frequent as professional understanding continues to mature. And finally, we found that ongoing professional learning remains a cornerstone of effective teaching. The most impactful schools foster a low-stakes, collaborative culture where teachers feel trusted to experiment, reflect, and improve without fear of judgment. We saw some excellent examples of peer coaching, inquiry groups, teaching triads, particularly in some of the schools we went to had been placed in a follow-up category where professional learning and collaboration was a fundamental driver in supporting their progress. School communities where staff plan and reflect together, observe and discuss each other's lessons and approaches to teaching, create a genuine sense of professional curiosity, teachers learning with and from each other, teaching as a sort of collective craft. However, where professional learning is more sporadic or more time pressured, its impact, of course, is more limited. So, to summarise, while we are still seeing a mixed picture across Wales, in the best schools, teaching is purposeful, reflective and firmly rooted in the curriculum for Wales. These schools blend evidence with creativity, treating teaching as both an intellectual and a practical endeavour. Their teachers are confident professionals who collaborate, take risks and refine their craft together. I'm really pleased to say that you will hear from two of the providers today who have developed that particularly well in their schools. So thank you ever so much for listening to the introduction. I will now pass over to Julia Adams and her team, who will talk to you about some of the wonderful work that they've been engaged with. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Carl. Good afternoon. I'm Julia Adams, head teacher of the Montvine Primary School located in the Vale of Glamorgan. I'm presenting this afternoon with my deputy head, Harriet Maidment, and senior leader, Rebecca Millard. Collective teaching efficacy is a cornerstone of our school's professional learning culture, and I've been asked to share how this approach has enhanced the quality of teaching and learning at a Montvine Primary School. Collective teacher efficacy is obviously a powerful force in education. As John Hattie's research highlights, when teachers believe that together they can make a difference, they have a greater impact on student achievement than any other factor. In order to ensure consistent and high-quality pedagogy across the school, we have developed and embedded a structured approach to professional learning, which is built around three key elements: professional inquiry, peer collaboration, and reflective practice. Every member of our staff belongs to a small professional inquiry group. Using the spiral of inquiry approach, the cycle begins with scanning to identify learners' needs, focusing to form an inquiry question, developing hunches about what influencing factors, and learning through research. For example, one professional inquiry group explored effective questioning to deepen classroom dialogue, having identified that although a group of more able boys were able to answer mathematical questions accurately, their explanations of how they arrived at their answers were limited. Following professional learning with thinking schools, staff engaged with research by Dylan William, Blooms and John Hattie on formative assessment and dialogue-led learning, and then took action by trialling new questioning strategies in the classroom with a particular focus on encouraging pupils to analyse and evaluate their reasoning. This included TED questioning, where pupils were asked to tell, explain and describe the process they used. To check the impact, leaders built in protected time for joint observations, video reflections of pupils in action, and refinement to implemented strategies. Finally, outcomes were shared with the whole teaching team to inform and strengthen future practice. This approach fosters shared responsibility for improvement, resulting in teachers challenging pupils to expand their responses and improving their ability to articulate reasoning, particularly in literacy and mathematics. Professional dialogue is embedded across the school, with reflective conversations used continually to identify strengths, address areas for development, and refine practice. To support this, professional learning time is carefully planned throughout the year to align with the professional inquiry cycle, and opportunities for staff to observe each other and discuss outcomes are intentionally integrated into the MER cycle, reinforcing collective accountability and shared ownership of school improvement. Another example of how we enhance teaching through collective teacher efficacy is the development of teaching placemats. To sustain consistent, high-quality teaching and learning, our teaching team collaboratively designed these visual guides to summarise our key pedagogical principles and expectations. These living documents are regularly revisited and refined during ongoing professional learning sessions, which focus on what excellent teaching and learning looks like in a Bontvine. This collaborative process has fostered greater engagement and shared ownership, which also providing a common reference point and shared language that promote consistency and excellence across all classrooms. For example, our assessment and feedback placemats have successfully led to pupils from a young age being able to take responsibility for their own learning, with older pupils making sophisticated comments on their own and others' work, suggesting ways they can improve. This feeds into pupil-teacher conferences where targets are set and then pupils share these with their family members during a sharing afternoon. I've got a short video now to show you a couple of the pupils.
I've been working with my teachers to identify next steps in my writing, and I've noticed a big difference in how I write. My teachers help me see exactly what I need to improve, such as using different sentence types or more ambitious vocabulary. When I follow the advice, my writing becomes more lively and engaging for the reader.
I use success criteria to help me reflect on my writing too, and I've become much more competent at identifying how I can redraft my writing. I see myself as a writer now, and I understand that my writing is a journey.
Furthermore, when designing our professional learning journey in response to identified priorities, we prioritise maximum staff engagement by clearly explaining the purpose of the learning, activating prior knowledge, and managing cognitive load. Our planned programme across the year sets out clear expectations and builds in time for developing pedagogical knowledge, sharing best practice, and refining approaches collaboratively. An example of this is our whole school focus on improving pupils' writing. Staff explored the journey of writing by revisiting expectations at each stage of the process. Through consistent modelling, structured peer support, and targeted professional dialogue, teachers developed a shared understanding of effective practice. This collaborative approach strengthened collective efficacy. Teachers felt confident and equipped to apply high-quality strategies consistently across classrooms. As a result, pupils are making stronger progress in their writing, demonstrating increased confidence, greater fluency, and a deeper understanding of the writing process. At a Bontvine, collective efficacy lies at the core of our professional culture. Through collaboration, inquiry, and reflection, our staff continually learn from one another and work together to improve outcomes for every pupil. The impact is clear: greater consistency in teaching, more confident and reflective practitioners, and pupils who think deeply, question effectively, and take increasing ownership of their learning. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Julia. That gave us a real insight into the work that you and your staff and pupils are doing. And please extend our thanks to your pupils who took part in that video. And thank you to everyone who's starting to post questions about what they're hearing today from Carl, Julia, and then from Rhys. But I'd like to start. Julia, where do you see the next steps for you and your staff with this approach?
It's got to be, it's now so embedded that it's something that we really do have to continue, and we're just constantly looking to improve. And it really is sort of leading forward from the outcomes of what we've done, send us in the direction that we feel we need to go. It's just forever being open-minded.
Thank you. Carl, I know you had a question for Julia.
Yeah, obviously I came to your school, Julia. It was lovely to see how well your staff work together. So the thing that I'd like to sort of ask a little bit is that sort of how you're sharing the work that you've done more widely and how you're involving other partners in your work. You talk to me a little bit about that.
We work very well as a cluster. We have a little cluster of schools that work together, and that we do some shared professional learning as well, staff working together, visiting the other schools. And that's a real strength. We work with a little team of 6 of us, and we very much learn from each other.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks, Carl, for your presentation as well. We're going to move on next to Rhys Hopkins, the Deputy Head from Fitzallen High School.
Thank you very much indeed. Pranam Dar, everybody. Firstly, thank you very much indeed for the invitation to speak. I've been asked to speak about our approach to developing effective research-informed approaches to teaching and what we refer to as the Fitzallen fundamentals of great teaching. There's some background to Fitzallen on the slides. And it is, I think, relevant to point out that one thing that we speak a lot about in our school is the fact that great teaching is the most important lever that we can pull to raise the attainment of our pupils. And this is particularly true when supporting pupils to overcome barriers to learning, which really sits at the heart of our work in Fitzallen. So Curriculum for Wales, as we know, covers both what we teach as well as how it is taught, and the kind of autonomy afforded to schools to make decisions about how best to meet the needs of their pupils is something that we really welcome. As alluded to on the slide, we discovered some mixed views on how the Curriculum for Wales should be interpreted. And a key objective for us a few years ago now was to try and ensure a shared understanding amongst staff of what constitutes highly effective teaching. We felt that sometimes in a world that seems to favour, I guess, like a polarisation of views, experiential learning or discovery learning was sometimes pitted as being somehow at odds with perhaps what you might refer to as explicit teaching or direct instruction. We preferred not to get drawn into any of those kind of possibly false dichotomies, I should say, and instead think that great teaching is and always has involved a blended approach. And one of the things that was important to us was, I guess, to give staff permission to really lean into the importance of having very clear and ambitious learning intentions, quality explanations, rich questioning, effective feedback, and so on. We feel that these really are the fundamental elements of effective pedagogy. So a little bit on how we've done this. It was very important to us that staff engaged with the best bets from the best available evidence when it relates to great teaching. And so giving staff time and space to do this was crucial. We took a sort of graduated approach with some blogs for staff which were quite accessible, through to signposting some more in-depth material for staff who were keen to take a deeper dive. My experiences to date have kind of helped me understand that done poorly, educational research can sometimes alienate staff, not least because the research can be imperfect and it doesn't always necessarily chime with staff's lived experience. We wanted to make sure that our shared understanding of what constitutes great teaching made the most of the collective wisdom of the staff. In our school, we have almost 150 teachers. That is hundreds, if not thousands, of years of kind of shared experience in the classroom, and that matters. So following some initial reading and reflection, we brought staff together in the hall as part of an inset activity to try and identify the features of great teaching. We used big pieces of flip chart paper to try and capture these, and the conversations were so powerful. We then took those away for some more focused work by our teaching and learning focus group, who began to distill the ideas into our Fitz-Allen fundamentals and codify great teaching. We then presented these back to the staff for their critique, and the revised version was finalised. You can see on the screen, we have 5 sort of key elements, and as we click through, you will see that each of those breaks down further into subdivisions. And then finally, what you'll see on the screen is that we try then and exemplify what that would look like in practice with suggested strategies that can support. So the section titled "What does this look like in practice" is, if you like, a bridge between the research and then the practical application. Because what you can get in the research sometimes can be quite abstract, and maybe what is missing is, how do I as a classroom teacher go to my lesson tomorrow and implement this with a year 9 on a wet Wednesday afternoon? It's also critical for staff to understand that the only way we can judge how effective we have been in terms of our teaching is through the impact it's had on the pupils. So doing strategies isn't in of itself great teaching, unless of course it results in great learning. And our recent Estyn visit really helped us to kind of dial into the importance of judging the efficacy of teaching by being really focused on the extent to which pupils are actually learning. So a few points to note: there were things we didn't include. So for example, references to learning styles, for instance. There were some subtle semantic differences. So we preferred the term adapting practice to differentiation as an example. But unpicking these with staff was a really crucial part of the process. It's also worth noting that these are not in any way designed to be a checklist of things you might observe in a lesson. It's certainly not a tick list. The analogy that we use is to say that this is not a recipe for a great lesson, but rather a list of kind of high quality ingredients which a talented chef might combine to create irresistible flavors and meals. So the Fitz-Allen fundamentals is at the heart of everything we do. So for example, it's a structure for our professional learning. It supports target setting as part of performance management. Staff can reflect on these and identify areas for improvement. And it supports us in our self-evaluation of the effectiveness of great teaching. I think this was something which was picked up on in the previous presentation. That shared language has helped develop to a shared understanding of what makes great teaching. And I think that something else which was talked about previously also, and one thing I would really stress the kind of importance of, was developing those fundamentals with staff, created that sense of ownership. This wasn't something that was done to them, and we don't feel it would have been as effective if we'd simply taken a kind of an off-the-peg approach, if you like. It's given value to making sure that our practice is underpinned by the best available evidence. That's really important. You know, we take huge responsibility in the job we do in terms of moving learners along, and we don't want to gamble with that in any way. But it's also given value to staff's professional wisdom and experience, and that was really important as well. It's finally, I think, what has been really successful is that it's given us a really solid foundation to move on to other areas of school improvement. So we've spent the last 18 months looking at establishing a really effective culture and climate for learning in our school. That is the first of the Fitz-Allen fundamentals, and we were delighted that Estyn really recognised that on their recent visit. We're doing some more work now on curriculum design, and within the fundamentals, the importance of things like deep curricular understanding and sequencing of learning is something that is stressed there, and that's meant there's been a really kind of logical link to the work we're doing now on effective curriculum design. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Diolch yn fawr. I hope that was helpful.
It was, Rhys. Thank you so much. And it's when a question's come in which just links to what your last statement. It's asking, how has your use of research influenced how you sequence learning and design progression
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Quite a lot to get into there. So I think the importance of kind of sequencing and coherence is something we talk about a lot. Identifying big ideas within subjects. We take a subject. We believe in the importance of subject disciplines. So we, whilst we look to make interdisciplinary links between subjects, we think that teaching by subject gives that subject focus, and the sequencing can be logical and coherent, kind of vertically within those subjects, prior to trying to achieve that sort of horizontal coherence across subjects. That's been really important. And I think also, we talk a lot about the subjects have their own traditions, right? And that brings a degree of specificity to the curriculum, which we think is really helpful as well. I mean, there's a lot we could discuss there, but I hope that's been at least in some way helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much. So, Julia, another question has come in for you. Someone's asking, how do pupils contribute to or influence the professional inquiries, for example, in helping staff understand what supports their learning best?
Rebecca's going to answer this, Liz. Or Harriet.
Go on, Harriet. So yeah, so in terms of how our pupils influence our professional inquiry,
that's what the question is about. Yeah.
So pupil voice is a really important part of our school. It underpins things such as the pupil inquiries as well. But in terms of how it impacts our professional inquiries, it's from what we can see on the ground. So when we're in the classroom, when we're making those observations, when we're interacting, when we're teaching, it's those big messages that come from the children. And also part of our MER cycle, when we're doing our observations, having our pupil voice groups, that's another way in which they influence or can have an influence on our professional inquiries.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of our Estyn webinar on teaching in the curriculum for Wales. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Julia and her team, and to Rhys and to Carl. If you have any questions that we haven't managed to answer today, please email us at communications@estyn.gov.wales so we can get back to you with an answer. You can always use that email address as well to send us any feedback, particularly about today's session. On behalf of all of us here at Estyn, diolch yn fawr, and we hope that you have a great evening, but an even better half term. Hwyl fawr. Thank you very much, everybody.
Sure. Right.